Okay, so Twitch chat, obviously T1 is coming up in just a bit. Let me get pop out player. All right, so let's react to a Griffin clip. So, okay, I already sort of prefaced this. One, Fiction is a person that seems to get a lot of hate from coaches, analytical creators, and like other stuff. To my knowledge, he's very large on TikTok. I see sometimes I see TikTok, sometimes I see Reels, sometimes I see Shorts, where he pops up because of like algorithm and stuff. And every single time I listen to whatever it is, I get very not angry. Kind of angry, because it's very dishonest. Almost everything that's happening now. Griffin's opening line is that this guy exists to spread information. I think that's kind of actually accurate. Like, at least if you're viewing it as the clips or the shorts or something are like very short, because it doesn't seem like he actually cares about what should happen. He takes the end result and then he analyzes how it happened as if it should always happen, which is really weird. At least that is my take. Now, obviously, you guys might have seen the thing during Worlds where he got into it with Vigar V2 and some other people, because he made the comment that you must always take teleport versus Korean teams. That, you know, that there's just champions that can't take teleport versus Korean teams. Now, it was in reference to G2 playing Darius, and he made all these comments about how you need teleport versus a Korean team and yada, 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 yada. Has nothing to do with Korean team. Also, Darius should never take teleport. Also, you do not need to take teleport on Darius, regardless of who you're playing against. It's just better to actually take Ghost if you know what you're doing and you just properly play. Now, there's other champions that also don't take teleport, and we've seen this in LPL. We've seen it in, LCK. We know that Quinn does not take teleport. We know that Rumble sometimes actually takes Ignite. I think those are two really good examples. I'm trying to think if there's like other examples off of the top of my head. Tryndamere, another one. Tryndamere, when he was popping up everywhere in the meta, Tryndamere would take Flash Ghost. So obviously Tryndamere does not also take teleport. And when I ended up treating that as like sort of like a jokey thing last week, obviously he called, and I tagged Vigar V2, I tagged the Pope, etc. He ended up calling Vigar V2 a pedophile on Twitter in response to that tweet, which is just really fucking weird. So the whole thing is just very strange. Now, I don't know what clip this is, so I'm going to watch it, but I'm just prefacing that with my own experiences. Now, let me say this, because I said this right before me and Unforgiven just played the 2v2. Claims that NA pros only play 4 hours a day, and if they put in 8 hours on par with the Korean teams, the gap wouldn't be as large. I actually do think that the average... So I do actually think that the average amount of time spent by NA pros is probably around 4 to 5 hours per day. Yeah, I would say that actually probably is a relatively accurate claim. Now, I don't agree that if they put in 8 hours on par with the Korean teams that the gap wouldn't be as large. That just has nothing to do with it. And Korean mechanical skill is not a large gap. Completely don't agree with this at all. There is such a major gap. So like I don't know. I feel like if so Griffin just got here 2 weeks ago, so he didn't play in the academy scrims that we were running, right? I feel like if he played in the academy scrims and he literally just saw what was happening, it would be really weird. The other thing that's very strange to this is that in some of the in-house scrims that we're playing in, there are actually academy players that are playing in these scrims, and we have former Korean pros that are just casual players nowadays playing in some of these scrims, and we have some of the academy Korean pros, and I think everyone can see what is happening on a mechanical level in some of those games. So like that's another like weird like thing, because Griffin's even bearing witness to it, that like the Korean players are just like, and they're just sort of like whatever. Now, there's also all the stories about the LCS and LEC teams that when they come to Korea and they scrim the academy teams of the LCK teams, they end up with losing records, typically. One of the things that, ended up happening last year during the like C9 Jensen bootcamp, etc., is that I believe there was several days where T1 Academy ended up just annihilating C9 during the bootcamp. At least I think that was a conversation that I had with Fudge when I ended up meeting Fudge for like, like KBBQ and drinks that one day. So it's not true. There is a very, very large mechanical gap. Now, I think Griffin is maybe like oblivious to it because of the way that he plays the game and his level of mechanics, but also I feel like it's a little bit contradictory because he already sort of saw it when he was playing normals and stuff and talking about like even the silver, gold, and platinum Korean players. Now, obviously, this is referencing the highest levels of the ladder. But even still, it's just not true that Academy players go to Korea and hit Challenger. In fact, there's many Academy players here right now. There's a lot of boot campers, and many of them some of them are actually in Diamond. There are some ERL Academy players that are here that are Diamond. They are High Challenger NA, they are Diamond. Another thing is like, examples of like boot campers that have lived with me over the years and stuff. Now, one of the things that I did not realize is that Griffin is at the MMR right now, which is like 200, 300 master, which is where a lot of them do get stuck. Now, if you go back into season 7, 8, 6, 9, etc., if you see Griffin's current MMR in OPG, or like you see his current thing, he's top 2,500. Anyone who used to watch my solo queue streams from way back in the day, so 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, we were always permanently playing in about top, we were anywhere from top 2,000 to top, 400 is my peak ever. Like percentile wise on Korea, top 400 was my peak ever. With Tom Kench, I think it was like season 7. But it was season 6 or 7, ended up being top peak ever. But always it was around that MMR. This is the games where a lot of people get stuck, is about top 2,000 to 4,000. Is where boot campers and academy players start getting stuck. And again, there's a lot of challengers here right now. There are academy players. And then likewise, there are some solo queue players that are here that are doing very, very, very well. Like if you do XD carry machine, this is Cat Evolved. I think he's going to end up getting challenger. Yeah, okay. He's going to end up getting challenger. Now, Cat Evolved is 63% on Katarina, and he loses on everything else. He literally just loses on everything else. So you have probably the best non-Korean Katarina player in the world playing his main champion in Challenger Korea, and he loses on predominantly everything else. Now, this is also an academy player that had competitive experience and everything like that, and also Cat Evolved has been here for a very long time. He had another ID. I can't remember what the ID was, but like this is just one example. There's some other academy players that we could like look up and all this other good jazz. But I think the main point remains. Okay. So yeah, it's also really weird because me and Griffin have had talks about this, that most academy players don't hit Challenger. In fact, it's why he's nervous about, not getting Challenger and stuff. But we'll see. Anyways, let's play the clip. That was a very long, but I wanted to react to Griffin's main tweet and then I wanted to react to the clip. All right, let's see.
Developing any talent. However, if you're going to get paid $60K to play League of Legends, there has to be a requirement, like minimum, like 9 to 5, so 8 hours of actual gameplay a day, and then break on Sunday, whatever, like an actual job, Because I guarantee you, the NA players right now are not doing 8 hours of practice every day.
That is true. The mass majority of NA pros do not do that much practice. And in fact, a lot of them don't spend time with each other. And a lot of them, even if they are actually playing the game, are not necessarily playing Summoner's Rift. In fact, you have a lot of NA pros that just say that they don't want to play. We've seen it with Champions Queue. We've seen it by, comparing the solo queue accounts of like, various pro players over the years, comparing it to LEC, LPL, and LCK and stuff. And then also on game days, okay, this is one of the things that people don't realize. Game days are counted as pseudo off days in a way. Because you get up, you go to Riot, you have to be at Riot 2 hours early, you go through makeup, you do all that other stuff, you're not playing a game, you go on stage, you play the game, you go home, usually there's a team meeting, then you break. There's no scrims, there's no requirements, no one does anything. Typically what ends up happening is the team eats together, then they go out, they meet their friends, they meet their girlfriend, they go and play Valorant. They do these types of things. They actually don't play on game days, or at least a lot of them don't. So that is 3 days out of the week, not including their off day, that they're actually just not playing a whole lot of League of Legends. This has been talked about a lot. Yeah, it's just... Yeah.
They're not. They're playing like 4 hours, then they fuck off and master and play World of Warcraft. And that's why we suck. Like,
well,
I've said this before, but like, our mechanical skill is not too different, not too far off from Korean players.
That's just not true.
I see a bunch of academy players on Twitter They go.
And it's just not true, because whenever you hear about the elite Western players literally talk about colliding with Korean players at Worlds, or when the Korean or Chinese players come over for boot camps, you literally hear all of them say they are just on a different tier. The random Korean and Chinese players that come over, even if it's not like the named players, right? Like Uzi. Viper, like Viper, Showmaker, Chovy, Gumayushi in yesteryears and stuff, when he was considered like an absolute menace and phenom in bot lane, and he's, having some issues, or like Carrier come over. Even if it's not those players, you still hear these people, the LEC, LC, S Pros, etc., literally just say that mechanically they are like it's like facing the best players in their regions respectively. Mechanically, but they still make mistakes, and they're still prone to doing blunders and stuff.
Go to Korea, they hit solo queue, and then they end up challenger. So our
That's
mechanical ability is not way worse than Korean players. It's just our
hitting challenger in Korean solo queue is not just about mechanical ability. There's also a very big difference in mechanical ability amongst challenger players and even grandmasters. You can actually have grandmaster and master players have better mechanical ability than a challenger player. There's a lot of things that go into being challenger. We're not going to actually argue that all challengers are mechanically equal. We're also not going to argue that all grandmasters are mechanically equal, or that all master players are mechanically equal. Even if Griffin ends up, hitting challenger or something like that, we're not going to argue that, the mass majority of people that hit challenger from NA or something are mechanically comparable to Griffin or Blabber, or, these types of players, etc.
Macro sucks. Our teamwork sucks. Our work ethic sucks. It's all teamwork. The Asian teams flow together. Yep. I don't know if you guys watched that Ruler peel video, but that was hot. Like, NA players could not peel Ruler like his teammates did.
I agree with
No
that.
shot. There's two paths that NA can take. Either everyone shuts the fuck up, drops all the ego, practices 8 hours a day, every day, on par with the Korean teams, or you can just give up, accept that you're bad, because no one's gonna watch you if you're bad, and then become a content region. And both are fine. I'm totally fine with both. Content region is fucking hilarious, but it'd also be nice to see NA be competitive for once in their fucking lifetime. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on it.
NA has been competitive. In fact, NA is actually often competitive at the very start of all esports. If you look at the history of esports, which usually whenever you hear people begin to make these claims, they haven't fucking been around long enough. I don't know how old Fiction is. Griffin is obviously, 16 going on 17. I've been in esports 19 going on 20 years at the highest brackets of, competitive esports across various titles. So I have seen the creation and death of so many different games. I've been around for all of the esports. I've monitored and been a part of all of the scenes. I have friends spanning across multiple titles and stuff. I saw so many things go on that all of these people who make these comments and they have these discussions about these cultural issues and backgrounds and regional issues and everything, they can't even begin to talk about, because they have absolutely no basis for the claims when responding to history and knowing what actually went into it. So we can actually talk about StarCraft 1. I can talk about StarCraft 2. The best players in the world in StarCraft 1, 1998 to 2000, was actually non-Korean players. Okay? Now, StarCraft ended up coming out in 1997. It was obviously really big, and it popped the fuck off. Nowadays, we know that Korea is untouchable. You take a Korean pro player, you take the absolute best non-Korean pro player, and the Korean pro player will 100-0 the non-Korean. This level of domination has never occurred in any other esport, and it remains true to this day, despite there being several non-Korean players that play StarCraft 1 all day, every day, watch VODs, and it's literally their whole life, and they cannot beat the top Korean players in StarCraft 1 to this day. So that is a thing that does go on. Now, one of the things that I will talk about, though, is ignorance to history, because every single time these people open their mouths, they just display it. They have absolutely no memory, apparently, whatsoever. So in StarCraft 1, the best players in the world in 1998 through 2000 for about 2 years was actually European and North American players. The only non-Korean player to this day to win a Korean major on Korean home soil is Guillaume Patri from Canada. And Guillaume Patri ended up doing it in OSL. He ended up being the only non-Korean to ever win the equivalency of an LCK or in OSL, MSL, etc. in StarCraft 1. Guillaume is Canadian, and he ended up doing that. The other players that were notable for taking out top Korean pros in online tournaments and dominating them in competition and actually just being way more creative than the Korean players, because that's our fucking edge, and a lot of that comes from our culture. Now, it's not necessarily our culture, right? I'm American. I'm very mixed in with Korean. No one's culture is ever just going to be completely the same. But what I mean by that is that Korean culture is very solidified in a way, right? It's going to be very rare to find Korean outliers that do not just fall into the hive mind, fall into not asking why, not asking questions, and just sort of always falling in line and, always doing whatever the status quo is, and blindly following the meta, right? Now, obviously, NA and EU's edge is that there's so much diversity of cultures and everyone's upbringing is very different. Not that Korean players' upbringings can't be different, but the cultures are so diverse that it leads to naturally this ability to ask why and how on several things. So in Europe, there were several players that were better than Korean players. One of them was from Norway, and his ID was Slayer. And Slayer was a monster. Slayer was actually asked by Korean teams to come to Korea because Slayer ended up winning so many online tournaments and just being a complete monster. The current owner of GoToGamers.net, which is a news website, it used to be a competitive website, it used to have replays and stuff, actually had esports teams at some points. His name is Everlast. He is a Swedish person. I believe that his name is Victor Martin, and now he is a huge entrepreneur, ended up turning into a high-stakes poker player, and then he turned into buying and purchasing real estate as well as running businesses and stuff. His name was Everlast99. He is the first world champion in StarCraft Brood War. He was a Swedish player that ended up, moving to Malta, I do believe, and he came to Korea, and he shit on Koreans. There was also Elke, Bertrand Grospellier, who was one of the top non-Korean players and was a lot better than most Korean players. And at certain points, there were people that were really, really, really close to being able to break in to the Korean stuff by literally moving to Korea, living there for very, very long times, and doing very well. And there's only one non-Korean player ever who was probably better than all the B teamers and almost made it to the A team, and he was a monster. What was his name? Draco Narcolepsy from Poland, I do believe. And he lived in Korea for a while. All right, so let's see. Oh, no, actually, sorry. Draco was his ID. But his name is Christoph. I can't pronounce it. I'm so sorry. He's now 35. So he was old. He actually joined OGN Sparkies, which is basically the equivalency of an LCK team. He ended up leaving I thought he lived there actually a little bit longer, in 2007. Draco was a monster. Draco was super sick. It made no sense. Now, this is another player that was also a monster in 1999 and 2000. In fact, people accused him of creating or coding bots and practicing against them because he was so good. This is Blackman from, I believe, Germany. And this was a player that caused a lot of problems for... actually, he's from Poland, too. So Blackman was one of the strongest Zerg players in the first years of StarCraft Brood War, and he ended up losing in 2002, but he was a monster online in the early years. Fisheye was another one. Maybe Fisheye is the German? Fisheye is the German. Okay. So Fisheye was also a complete monster in the early stages. WCG experiences in 2001, yada, yada, yada. Guillaume Patri, this is where, Guillaume Patri, this is the only non-Korean player ever to win a Korean major. He was the first generation of Korea. He's one of the most successful foreigners of all time. Guillaume is one of the best gamers, probably, of all time. And what I mean by that is that Guillaume still to this day does casually play games. I believe that he's actually high rated in League of Legends. He's also a super millionaire from the Bitcoin boom and other stuff like that. Whenever he does return to playing games, casually, even in StarCraft 2, he was actually really, really, really good. He was, to my knowledge, very good at Hearthstone, and I think he was also in the early seasons of TFT extremely high rated. He is just one of the best gamers probably of all time across many, many eras. And if you listen to Guillaume Patri talk about video games, he's also completely fluent in Korean. He appears on podcasts. He talks about strategical stuff and RTSs and stuff like this. I only had the privilege of meeting him once and talking to him a couple of times when he would make his return stints to StarCraft. and all this other stuff because he lives in South Korea. I believe that he has a South Korean wife. He's completely native level in South Korea, etc. If you listen to Guillaume Patri talk about video games, he is extremely analytical, and it's not what you would expect from someone who is, one, in Korea for 20 years, but then two, it's nothing that you would ever hear from a Korean player. Guillaume is all about finding the edges and all about min-maxing, and then combining that, obviously, with very, very, very strong mechanics. So, yeah, I mean, it even says in his biography, he relies on clever tactics, strategic insight, and deep understanding of the game. Guillaume revolutionized and created many of the standard builds which would go on to be used for many years to come. He was the person that came up with it, not the Korean players. Guillaume also did it while practicing less than a lot of the Korean players, because this is when the pro houses were all like starting to pop up and stuff. So when you have assholes like Fiction end up coming in and start to talking about history and stuff, you also ignore Warcraft 3. So when Warcraft 3 ended up coming out, yes, you end up getting Moon in the later years, aka the fifth race, who just dominates all the competition, and then you have Sky, and you have all the other players. You have Lucifer, but you still have some strong European players that are very, very good. Grubby being one of them, as well as Todd, Yon Merlo. There are a lot of very good Western players. There's also Wizard, which was a player from North America. Warcraft 3, Europe and NA dominated for the first 2 years. Now, if you follow the trend of most esports, typically NA is on top in the very beginning. Now, I don't necessarily know what would be the specific reason for this. I think that it is North America's affinity for trying to find the cheesiest and most creative ways to win, okay? It's like when you have a very difficult job, you hire a lazy person to do it. Now, I understand that some people might take issues with this quote because they will find a simple and easy way to do it. So it's something like that. North America has always had top players at the very beginning of games. In StarCraft 2, this was quite literally no different. Some of the best StarCraft 2 players in the very, very beginning and even early on was North American players. And then probably the best non-Korean, as well as there were some other non-Koreans that were better than all of the Korean players, were from Europe. And we're talking about Stefano from France, Thorzane, Naniwa. We're talking about these players, right? Even early on, White Raw was extremely good. And even some of the players from Taiwan, such as Sen, was extremely good. You also had Sase coming from Poland as well. There were so many good non-Korean players in the early years. Then you had Scarlet ended up popping up as well. You had Greg Fields, Idra, who was in Korea, ended up coming to NA, still remained a very, very top tier player, and was able to take down the Korean players. It wasn't until about 2 years into the game that we really started to see things fall. In fact, if you actually went back to the StarCraft 2, team leagues and stuff, and you saw the collision between some of the boot camping StarCraft 2 pros as well as the top tier StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2 teams, you actually saw the boot camping pros would beat the StarCraft 2 Korean players very, very, very often. And even when the Kespa Elite ended up switching over, some of the StarCraft 2 pros were still better than the Kespa Elite even after like 6 months or something. So history is not on the side of the people who make these arguments. Now, you can also extend this further into Tekken, which is the thing that I did a lot of research on to try to understand the fighting game community. Another really good example would be to go into Dragon Ball Z Fighters, because obviously you have Sonic Fox, but then you have the domination of the Japanese scene and the fall of Sonic Fox in that game, because Sonic Fox Japan actually embraced Dragon Ball Z Fighter as well as some other neighboring Asian countries. So the practice thing, the engine was online for Asian culture. Whenever the engine becomes online for a video game, typically the Asian regions will win. It's all about if it actually ever comes online, and it doesn't in a lot of ways. So if you look at Dota, that is one of the things that people will raise their fingers and say, Korea doesn't win at Dota. Korea's Dota 2 server was literally so inactive that Valve decided that it was not cost efficient to keep running the server due to the low player pool and closed down the server. So the top Korean players were forced to play on 170 to 180 ping cross server in order to continue playing the game. China did not embrace the game as much as they embraced actually Warcraft 3, StarCraft, which also still have pro leagues in China, in addition to League of Legends, which is going on. So yes, while you do have some top Chinese and some top Korean teams and players, it is not embraced the same way that the Asian engine needs to be embraced in order to birth the elite level players that are such mechanical monsters that it doesn't seem to matter about your creativity and your tactics and all these other things as long as there is an established meta. Because what they do is they practice 12 hours a day because they find it fun, and they play 16 hours on end, and then what ends up happening is they are so just well versed in all of the possible scenarios and flowcharts that can end up happening from various build orders and various openings and various game states, that they can execute on it way better than you can, because it's all that they play, because you've established a meta. Fast forward to some of the conversations that I've had for years on end. You can go back on my YouTube for about 9 years and you can literally hear me talking about these exact patterns. They're still coming true today, as well as things that are just not happening in the Western scene. And what you would end up having is hearing me talk about that one of the ways to actually upset the Korean and Chinese players, whilst acknowledging that there is a mechanical deficit, but that the mechanical deficit can't come out in every single game because of limited sample size. And what I mean by that is that if you end up going and you play 100 1v1s against something, obviously if you just play them in one 1v1, you can't actually see what maybe they could have done in other spots that would actually show their mechanical ceiling, because it's such a low sample size. You play them in 5 games, it's still not necessarily enough. They might have been able to do some really crazy things in certain situations that you wouldn't expect them to be able to do with the amount of precision and accuracy that they would have had. So Worlds tournaments and MSIs are doing this, right? There's a very low amount of games being played against the Chinese and the Korean teams, which means that they can't actually exercise their mechanical skill ceiling that would actually show you and display how much better they actually are than Western pros. And one of the things that I always talked about is stripping them of their muscle memory. How do you strip them of the muscle memory? Well, the Western pros, they're not that much worse than the Korean and Chinese players, to the point where they can't win the games. Obviously, we know that they can win the games. The way that you strip them of the muscle memory is by creating environments and situations where they don't have muscle memory. And obviously, this is in reference to very off-the-wall champion picks and opening strategies that disrupt the flow of the game and strip them of the flowcharts. And that is exactly still what also remains true in StarCraft, and it still remains true in a lot of other games. And when you hear some Korean players in, StarCraft 2 and other games get interviewed after, facing things like this, they literally say that they didn't know what to do in some of the game states, and that they're unfamiliar with everything that's going on, and that they have to study and research it because they don't know what to do. So it really disrupts the flow of the game, puts doubt into their mind, plants the seed of doubt of like what is going on. And if you're dragging them into your world, then you potentially have an advantage. But obviously we don't have this go on inside of the Western scene. Now, I can keep talking about various other games if people want to even talk about like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering and this type of stuff. China does not have the same amount of support kind of from like Wizards. And I'm not super familiar with like Hearthstone and stuff. Now, obviously there is not a mechanical component to this in these games. However, from talking to some of the best Magic the Gathering players in the world, Valentin Mackel, I've had him on my stream several times. There was also the German player a couple of years ago in 2018. We ended up talking to the maker of Splinter Twin. I'm forgetting what his name is off the top of my head. Valentin Mackel and a lot of the other Europeans that have traveled to Asia and gotten to play versus the Japanese and the Koreans and the Chinese are certain that China is the best at Magic the Gathering. But that is not something that is, one, widely accepted, and two, people wouldn't even necessarily believe it because China basically has its own bubble. And because China has its own bubble and it has such a limited amount of tournaments and exposure and all this other stuff, you don't actually get to see the Chinese players end up coming out, but they're basically like machines at the game. And so obviously there is a luck component, there's a lack of mechanics and stuff like that. But I do know that a lot of the top European players do think that China and Japan are the best, at least Magic the Gathering players. To my knowledge, in Pokemon, I could be a little bit wrong on this, but I believe that Japan dominated for a very, 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 very long time. And again, these are games that lack mechanical components. Now, sometimes other people will cite other types of games. They'll try to point towards like Overwatch and stuff. And I think Overwatch is a really another good example because in the early stages, Korea did not necessarily dominate absolutely everything. Now, I don't know what goes on with Overwatch because it is dead game at this point. Heroes of the Storm, I think, is another really good example of a game that didn't even necessarily have a Korean engine, but to my knowledge, Korea did dominate in it. There's also some other games that Korea actually has an engine for that it doesn't care about other games. A lot of people have always pointed at CSGO as being heavily dominated by the Western scene. And the reason that Korea and China and these regions don't necessarily participate in CSGO is because Korea has its own game called Sudden Attack. So I'm going to go on Naver right now, and I'm going to type in PC Bong ranking. Okay, so I'm going to open this really quick, and I'm going to go into PC Bong ranking. PC Bong ranking. Okay. So we can go into PC Bong, gamer metrics. So right now, League of Legends has actually dropped to below 40%. That is the lowest that it's ever been. But if you see right here, number 6, sudden attack is 4.84. This is actually really similar to Valorant, which Riot is trying to push really hard. Sudden attack is actually even above Overwatch. Sudden attack is basically Korea's version of CSGO, and everyone is spamming me right now that we are in draft, and so I hope that you did enjoy this discussion. We didn't end up finishing the clip, but I think, honestly, it was kind of good. We went down memory lane. We sort of talked about it. I lose my mind every single time 17, 18, 19, even early 20-year-olds that literally their first game is League of Legends. They literally do not live, breathe, eat, and sleep games. And they open their mouths about cultural differences, regional differences, and they have absolutely no basis for history. And it makes me so upset because there was so much data and there's so many things to actually point towards, and there's so many consistent trends that repeatedly happen, at least in esports. And very, very heavy emphasis reminder for the people that don't understand something that I was just saying, which is if the Asian regions have the engine come online, that is when they dominate. And it doesn't happen right away. It's always at the very beginning that, NA and EU typically can actually be really good. Now, again, the engine requires a lot of people, not small subsets or, not small like sects of people or something where, they huddle together at like one location and stuff and just, do that, right? Because obviously that is what happens like for certain games, right? Like, for instance, Korea's Smash Ultimate scene is very small. There's a very, very small sect of people that end up playing that. It's to be expected that Korea would not be good at Smash Ultimate, or something like that. And I think that these types of games are a little bit different. But I hope that you guys enjoyed that that talk. Let's see. Oh, I think I get it. Oh, okay, I didn't read Griffin. Oh, I disagreed with Griffin's tweet because I didn't realize that he was mocking him. Griffin's actually agreeing. Okay, the mechanical gap between Korea and NA is huge. Him saying NA is just completely false. Let's retweet that. And then let's retweet this too. But anyways, yeah. All right, let's get into the draft arena. I hope that you guys enjoyed that.